Hello, my name is Arnaud Marcus, and this is an open challenge for Jacques Fresco and Roxanne Meadows of the Venus Project. I've sent you an email a short while ago describing 3 points I wish to challenge you about. My hopes were that you would address these points in the following Q&A session apparently it was the last one, and I kind of missed the train, I guess. As a side note, you keep telling people, inviting them to ask questions about the Venus Project's proposals and the resource-based economy model, but it seems after hearing a lot of talks of Jacques and all of his answers, there seems to be a pattern in which you're open for questioning about the Venus Project and to understand the resource-based economy, but you're not really open for questioning the integrity of the resource-based economy model, the scientific validity or the implementational viability. I've been researching the Venus Project and the Zeitgeist movement for over 2 years now, and I've really taken the time to learn everything there is to know about this idea. I've watched a lot of YouTube videos, basically everything Jacques or Peter are in it. Chances are I've seen it. I've also listened to all of the blog talk radios of both the Zeitgeist movement and the Venus Project and all the latest Q&A sessions that Jacques has made. I seem to have found some very basic flaws in the fundamental assumptions upon which the resource-based economy model is founded. It's based upon some core assumptions that are supposedly proven facts, and recent studies and findings suggest certain irrefutable claims that falsify some of the core assumptions of the RBE model. And I'd like to challenge 3 of these assumptions and would like to get your responses on them, hopefully. So, assumption number 1, environment dictates behavior. There have been many forms of interpreting the mechanics of behavior along the years. The resource-based economy model seems to be founded on radical behaviorism, started by John B. Watson, later propagated by B.F. Skinner. Even at that time, an alternative approach called ethology evolved that directly contradicted some core assumption of behaviorism. Basically, what behaviorism is hinging upon is the kind of logical leap in which it's kind of a mathematical usage. Basically, we're saying environment shapes whatever's inside any organism, and whatever's inside any organism, it shapes its behavior. And so we can cancel out whatever goes inside each organism and go straight directly from the environment to the behavior. This is the basic flaw of behaviorism, and what ethology does is tries to understand whatever is inside the organism, how it's constructed, and tries to talk to the organism in his language, which is a provably more effective approach. Today, science considers behaviorism to be a long past failed experiment of understanding the mechanics of behavior, especially concerning humans. We know for a long time now that Watson's famous 12 infants quotation is false. I've been watching a course in YouTube called Behavior Biology. It's by the primatologist and professor of endocrinology in the Stanford University, Dr. Robert Sapolsky. He talks about a lot of subjects there, but as a side he touches upon behaviorism and kind of scientifically proves its falseness. So it seems to me that Jacques Fresco is hinging on some antiquated, long-lost, failed experiment of scientific history. As for the genetic argument, it is true that genetics only determine physical attributes, but it appears that epigenetical influences can result in having long-term effects on hormonal balance and the rate of reception of neurons, which influences behavior indirectly. The epigenetical effects are regulating the expressions of genes by controlling their promoters and determining which genes can be accessed. and the rate in which they are reproduced. While it is true that many of these effects are the result of environmental influences, they thereupon become heritable by a form of kind of recursive mechanism. It is due to the fact that gene selection can disable genes that are needed to select themselves for reproducing. It's kind of complex explanation, so I won't go into it any further than that. The course is online on YouTube, so you can search it, behavioral biology. There are, I think, two full lectures on genes, and he talks about all that there. But what this means is basically these genes affect the rate of production of enzymes and the combination of hormonal manufacturing by neuropeptides in the brain, which thereupon influences behavior tendencies and even promoting behavior patterns, irrespectively of any given environment. In other words, regardless of the environment, these people would develop behavioral tendencies due to their hormonal combination, which is dictated by these epigenetical effects. In this course, he also talks about behaviors of animals, and it basically separates the animal species across a continua between species of what's termed a tournament species and pair bonding species. Tournament species have the males which are much larger than the females and are generally aggressive. They have high levels of testosterone. They have stratified social structures with hierarchies and alpha males and all that. The alpha males do the majority of the breeding, and there's a constant competition among males to rise in the hierarchy to becoming the next alpha male. Pair bonding species have males and females of relatively equal sizes and are generally more egalitarian and less stratified in their social structures, with less aggressive competition. Humans, as it seems, are totally confused anywhere all across this entire spectrum of continua between these two extremes. We can be highly aggressive and we can be highly collaborative and peaceful. However, this does not mean that it's all about the current environment. My main point here is that a lot of the mechanics of behavior are results of programming that are done in prior environments, old environments that are no longer relevant. I'm going to touch on it on the following topic. This has to do with the way the human brain operates. It starts to lose plasticity exponentially after a certain age. It's the way it specializes. It's the adaptation mechanism underlying human adaptability. Generally, whatever is utilized more in early stages of life is flourishing, and whatever is unused in the brain generally dies. There are many areas in the way the mind works and the brain works in which early life experiences, even prenatal ones, can dictate response patterns irreversibly. For example, the hippocampus is an emotional registering mechanism that records emotional patterns or reactions in early life to later be used as a template for behavioral patterns for the rest of the organism's life. Associative memory in the brain relates to these records of the hippocampus, and it all goes down to basically the same mechanisms by which specialization is achieved in the brain. Neurons in the brain form long-term relationships that at some point become irreversible. Their axons angle closer and closer to their relations in kind of a self-perpetuating way. This basically means that irrespective of future environments, There are emotionally driven reactionary behavioral patterns that are generated by the hippocampus for as long as the organism lives, without any known method of reprogramming them from scratch. There is also a phenomena that seems to occur in many aspects of most organisms. It's called evolutionary lag. What this means is that the rate of environmental change outpaces the rate of adjustment of the organism to that environment. Evolutionary changes happen in a multitude of time spectrums, many of which are far greater than any single lifetime of any organism. What this means is that any given time frame for any creature, it is carrying with him a very large amount of evolutionary baggage. These come in the forms of physical attributes and behavioral patterns. They stick across many generations, long after the environmental relevance, and with no adjustment possible within any given single generation. Well, this phenomena occurs in humans also. We carry cultural customs, emotional inclinations, cognitive habits, and behavioral patterns that are a result of adjustments of many generations before, with no possibility of change within any given generation. That is mostly due to the cyclical nature of cultural influence, which is defined as the non-hereditary transmission of behavior. So, to conclude the behavioral determination portion, even if we accept the idea that environment determines behavioral patterns, that by itself does not solve the problem of aberrant behavior, because it only acts as a means of preventing their programming in the first place. It poses no solution to modifying these pre-programmed patterns once they're set. Okay, assumption number 3. All decisions can be arrived at and need not be made or taken by people. The problem is that data being collected by sensors is objective, but the information is subjective. What I mean by that is that information is derivative of interpretation of data. Data in itself is meaningless. Meaning is given to data by interpretation, which is always subjective. It is based on superimposing data onto context. And computer programming, which is what I do for a living, in programming is basically the coding of subjective interpretation of data to form information. Interpretation is coded into the computer program by defining criteria for data to be evaluated against. If a criterion is derived from any higher level criterion, then we have basically an infinite causality chain. At some point, a decision needs to be made for the highest criterion to exist, or else no interpretation could even begin to be coded into the computer, because we are constantly looking upwards for a higher level criterion to evaluate our data against. Another example for situations in which decisions need to be made and cannot be arrived at is when the data being collected is referring to two criterions which have the equal priority in their importance. For these cases, there's no way of deriving a decision, so there's a need for some kind of democratic decision making. Preferably that would be direct participatory democracy. That is in fact an example of apparent contradictions in Jacques' worldview, as he's talking about this kind of participatory voting, saying this would be a true democracy, but also saying no one makes decisions. Another one would be talking about the requirement for global adherence to the RBE model, while still saying that no coercion would be required and people would still be able to live outside of the RBE model. I'm kind of unclear on this point. It seems contradicting to me. So, this was my challenge for the Venus project for Jacques Fresco and Roxanne Meadows. I really hope to hear from you and get any response to alleviate these issues. Thank you.